Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2013 crossover event story, Green Lantern, Wrath of the First Lantern, part of DC's The New 52. Wrath of the First Lantern is actually the second part of what is really a single crossover that started with Rise of the Third Army, which I covered last week, so if you want a real intro, go watch that video. For everyone else, the concept is basically this: that the Guardians of the Universe, the oldest beings in the universe and self-appointed governing body of everything, are actually bad guys. See, after creating one police force that ended up murdering billions of people and another police force that they lost all control of, the Guardians decided that emotion itself needed to be eradicated from the universe, because obviously that's what the problem was. To achieve that end, the Guardians desired to make a third army that would have neither emotions nor autonomous control. They would then be completely under the control of the Guardians, and they would convert all living beings in the universe into more white zombies like them. But even the Guardians didn't have enough power to create such an army on their own, but they knew where to get it. So they traveled to the Chamber of Shadows, which sounds like a Harry Potter novel, but is actually a special prison hidden inside of a black hole. There are a second group of Guardians, called the Templar Guardians, kept an endless watch over the Chamber's one and only prisoner, a mysterious entity known only as the First Lantern. But drawing on the First Lantern's power was dangerous because it risked letting him go free, and when all the various Lantern Corps came to Oa to try and stop the Guardians and their third army, they were forced to draw on so much power from the First Lantern that he broke free. And that cliffhanger moment is where the previous story ended and is where this story begins, so let's just get right into it and take this away. The comic opens on a flashback, in one hell of a flashback at that, taking us to 10 billion years ago on the planet Maltus. Oa? As we meet up with Krona as he attempts to perform his illegal experiments only to be stopped by the Guardians of the Universe. Why do I feel like I've said all of that before? I don't know. I'm sure it's just one of those Matrix-y deja vu moments. Where was I? Oh right, loving this freaking art. Because what we have right here in this opening story is not only a flashback in terms of the story itself, but also a flashback in terms of comic book storytelling. That is to say, we're referencing scenes from earlier comics, like, say, the answer to every comic book trivia question ever, Crisis on Infinite Earths. And so while it's still clearly modern comic book technology being used to create these pages, everything from the line art to the coloring to the shading has all been noticeably simplified to give us more of a look and feel that we might be familiar with from those kind of 80s comics. It's a small detail that honestly most creators would probably not even think to do in the first place, but them going that extra mile here really makes this story already feel straight from the beginning that it's something special. Krona, the Mad Guardian, in his wicked cool sideburns, is attempting to view the very origins of the universe in a scene that will undoubtedly be familiar to fans of Crisis on Infinite Earths. In that comic, playing off events disclosed from an earlier Green Lantern comic, Krona's attempts to see the origins of the universe was something expressly forbidden in Oan culture due to legends of destruction, but Krona pressed on anyway. And so he would see a giant hand appear in his view screen, holding entire galaxies in its palm, but his attempts to learn more about what the heck that hand is supposed to be would cause an explosion that would bring evil itself into the universe. This would then create an antimatter universe in the antimatter planet Quard in the Moeffin Anti-Monitor Yo, and would lead to Krona being banished from Oan society. But this story says we never got the full story before, because while probably in Hal Jordan creator John Broom's mind, in that original story that hand was meant to be the hand of God or something as he created the universe, this comic takes a different route. Instead, we see that the hand has a ring on its finger, and then a person leaps through the view screen and joins them in the room. A person with a mad look in his eye, a very American looking astronaut outfit, and with the name Volthoom. In all caps, just like that. That is then basically all the information we're given on this character for some time, as we jump from here back into the present to see the First Lantern, freshly freed from his cage as happened at the end of the last story, as he taunts the Guardians because he's now trapped them in the same energy cage that they had been holding him in. And as he turns every member of the Third Army into dust in a single sentence, reducing the major thread of the previous giant crossover to a throwaway line in this one. Cool. He does some quick recaps for us also, and attempts to take us back into the past to the moment the Guardians decided to rid themselves of emotions, and somehow manipulates reality so that he changes the scene to where they instead don't give up the emotion. This causes the future, or present I guess, to change, but only for a moment, which makes Volthoom realize that he's not up to full strength, so he'll go around torturing people in order to drain emotion out of them, which basically is what he spends the majority of this crossover doing. Like the new Guardians, you have Carol trapped in a nightmare where she never gave up being a pilot to take control of Ferris Air, and so it got sold to another company, and now she's stuck as a test pilot in war zones, butting heads constantly with a stubborn Hal Jordan. Or Sane Walker, who gets to live a life where his family never died because he became a Green Lantern and saved them, only for the Guardians to now try to kill his planet by sending the Third Army after them. Or Larfleeze, who apparently is living with his family as well, as an earlier story showed that they are apparently alive. But each of them keep reasserting their true colors, much to the annoyance of Volthoom here. Then there's Kyle himself, who gets shown a timeline where his father took Kyle with him when he left their family, or another where Sinestro succeeded during the Sinestro Corps War, and now Earth and the Green Lantern Corps are all dead. Except for Guy, because assholes never die. But most importantly, he's also shown a timeline where Alex is still alive, though notably she is also breaking up with him, apparently. It's interesting because between that and the fact that they made a point of the fact that Alex was not what unlocked his mastery of any of the emotional colors in the previous story, it really starts to feel like the entire point of this series was less about Kyle becoming a White Lantern and more about the idea that Kyle is kinda getting over Alex and moving on to falling in love with Carol. Which I still feel like is a weird pairing. I just don't see them together, but whatever, I guess. Volthoom then gives Kyle the choice of which version of his life can become true, but when Kyle picks the universe where Alex is still alive, the First Lantern denies him, apparently just wanting to feed on his despair. Which is interesting to me because there's no color for despair, which I feel like is a weird and major oversight. Probably it's because they ran out of rainbow colors. I think blue probably should have been split into two colors so we could get another emotion in there. Rebirth sort of resolves this issue by, introducing non-visible colors, but that's getting really ahead of myself. Don't go asking for me to cover Rebirth Green Lantern next. I've got a lot on my plate just covering the New 52. Or do ask, and I'll probably do it, because I'm a pushover. Anyway, in Green Lantern Corps, Volty is doing similar torture, starting with Guy Gardner. There he focuses on Guy's family and Guy's father's disappointment with Guy. Guy, at least during the New 52, comes from a family of police officers in Baltimore. His father is a retired officer, his brother and sister are both cops, and Guy once was as well. But for the duration of the New 52, just why Guy actually stopped being a cop has been quite a mystery. All we know is that Guy's dad is extra pissed at Guy for being kicked off the force. The First Lantern finally reveals to us that it's because when Guy first became a cop, he was chasing someone wearing an explosive vest through an airport, and Guy made the choice to kill the bad guy before he could get on a plane, causing the vest to explode, but saving more lives than would have been lost otherwise. His bosses disagreed and fired him from the force, pushing the foundation for everything that followed for Guy. Volthoom also tortures John Stewart in Fatality, though mostly John, really, taking him to an alternate earlier encounter with Fatality where, as the only survivor of Xanshi, the planet that John was partly responsible for it being destroyed, she finally got her revenge on him. We also see an alternate timeline where John Stewart accepted the Guardian's call to become an Alpha Lantern, which they did offer to him back when the Alphas were first being created, and his renewed sense of justice as an Alpha ends with him killing all of his fellow GLC members. Along with some other alternate versions of events, including one where Kyle found an alternate way of stopping Mogo during War of the Green Lanterns so that John didn't have to blow him up, or John being killed by Kurt as opposed to what we saw happen in my Green Lantern Corps video, or John being executed for Kurt's death instead of being broken free by Guy Gardner. The torture for the various members of the Corps ends when Mogo completely covers them all in tiny little rocks from their own planetary body that apparently severs the First Lantern's ability to psychically connect with everyone. I'm not really sure why, but why not, I guess? In retaliation, the First Lantern sends alternate energy color constructs of everybody so they have to fight themselves while fighting themselves while fighting themselves. It's complicated. But it turns out that part isn't actually happening. It's just kind of a hallucination that Mogo created to help everyone recover from Volthoom's mental attacks. Volthoom! That then brings us to the main title, which has maybe surprisingly little Volthoom in it. I'm sorry, I'm just really enjoying saying that a lot. Volthoom! Anyway, we left off the previous crossover with Simon Baz and Badge being trapped in the Chamber of Shadows with Black Hand and the Templar Guardians. And Black Hand wants Simon dead straight from the get-go. Mostly just because he's a bad guy, I guess. So Hand uses his ring to create a vortex like the one we saw grab Hal and Sinestro earlier and pulls Simon into that vortex. Simon then wakes up in the dead zone. Yes, Hal, there was a TV show and it was heavily underappreciated. Where have you been? Oh, right, dead. And oh yeah, Hal and Sinestro are both here in this dead zone, and have been for both crossovers, not quite dead, but not quite alive either. Being led around by special guest star Tomar Ray, the very first member of the Green Lantern Corps we ever saw, outside of Hal himself I guess, way back in issue 6 of Hal's first solo series, and one of the first Lanterns Hal met in Geoff Johns' reimagined origin for Hal during Secret Origins. He's dead now, obviously. Unlike Hal and Sinestro though, Baz has kept his green ring. Sinestro, upon realizing this, immediately attacks Simon to try and steal it from him, but Simon just shoots the Kurugarian with a gun. Because Simon carries a gun. See, earlier when he was attacked by that crazy terrorist guy, Simon's ring ran out of juice, leaving him defenseless. Vowing to not let that happen again, Simon started carrying that guy's gun even after powering up his ring again. And yes, I did praise Geoff Johns in the last video for trying to reverse stereotypes on Middle Eastern people being violent, and then he goes and has Simon Baz be the only Green Lantern to carry a gun, but, you know, baby steps. Also, not that this is an excuse, but I'm pretty sure he only did it to have this scene, where Sinestro turns out to be perfectly fine because he just wills himself to be? Because you can do that in the dead zone, it would seem. And that might be important information for later. Just, you know, maybe. Meanwhile, back in the Chamber of Shadows, Badge and the Templar Guardians attempt to rescue Simon, not realizing Hal and Sinestro are there with him as well. Simon gets caught in whatever force they're using to rescue him, but he tries to reach out to Hal to save him too. This seems to cause Simon's ring to split back into two, and the new duplicate ring goes to Hal and Sinestro but is unable to pick between them. So Sinestro gets the ring to show us an image of Carol Ferris, who is currently in danger. And the momentary fear Hal feels for her is enough to break his connection to the ring and give Sinestro the chance to return to the world of the living with Simon. Alive and powered up again, Sinestro somehow teleports himself out of the Chamber of Shadows and back to his homeworld of Kurgar, where he gets back with Arsona, the woman he had a clear love/hate relationship with, as we saw in my Green Lantern video, in order to prepare her to fight the First Lantern. Only the First Lantern comes for Sinestro first, and does to him what he's been doing to everyone else, showing Sinestro a timeline where he didn't take the green ring and instead became a true leader of Kurgar, supported by Arsona, who fell in love with this version of him. Aw, isn't that sweet? So of course then the First Lantern just blows up Kurgar. Or starts to, anyway, but Sinestro does the impossible and becomes the first person to actually hurt Volthoom. And Volty no likey that. Unfortunately for him, he's strong enough by this point to just undo time like he's playing an emulator and returns to his previous save state where he gets to try again, and this time does succeed at blowing up Kurgar. Man, that's just effed up. Seriously, what the hell, guys? Having lost everything, Sinestro embraces his true calling and drops his Green Lantern ring so he can re-equip into his yellows. And that leaves us with just Atrocitus of the Red Lanterns. When last we left him, he was staring at a door of ghost faces, including Krona, deep below the surface of the planet Maltus. Cause here in this story, it is Maltis that's the homeworld of the Guardians, not Oa like they were seeming to suggest in the intro. Was there no editor trying to ensure consistency here or something? I mean, I guess the whole thing of whether Maltis or Oa was the original home planet of the Guardians is a convoluted mess that was maybe intended to have been written out of the New 52 altogether, but instead we just get more convoluted information, so yay. Anyway, Krona regales us with his backstory, which has notable similarities to Atrocitus' backstory, and Big Red even begins to feel a little sorry for Krona. But that just makes him realize that this is probably an effect that the planet is having on him, as there's something hidden deep inside the planet that can do this, and so he breaks his way down toward the planet's center where a giant machine holds something called the Great Heart. Only the first lantern shows up right then and shows Atrocitus an alternate timeline where the Manhunters didn't have the glitch that let Krona override them, and so his family and planet never died. So instead, Atrocitus became the Red Skull. I'm not even really joking about that. Leading his world into a fascistic, tyrannical empire where he brutally murders dissenters, kills his own wife as a supposed dissenter, and eventually ends up being murdered by his own son. The First Lantern insists that this was always going to be the inevitable future for Atrocitus without the Sector 666 slaughter, but he still offers to change the universe so that the tragedy of Sector 666 never happens. But Atrocitus is too angry at the outcome of that timeline and refuses Volthoom's offer. Volthoom! Which leads Atrocitus to have a crisis of conscience where he demands all Red Lanterns kill him, because now he considers himself to be the one responsible for the massacre of Sector 666 since he didn't take Volthoom up on his offer. And that order confuses his Lantern Corps about as much as it probably does me and you. You and me? Whichever. He doesn't go down without fighting though, and in fighting has the realization that he's been so focused on his own anger that he's been ignoring the anger of the rest of the universe. So now he wants to rededicate himself to being the embodiment of rage for everyone. A sort of empathic rage, if you will, I guess. Although that's also kind of been what he's saying he wants to do the entire Red Lantern series so far, so I'm not really sure how this is different, but sure. But before he can truly consider himself reborn, he feels he needs to kill the Guardian, so he heads to Oa to arrive there just in time for the final battle. But before we get to that, let's check back in with old Volthoom. Because old Volty here took the Great Heart thing from Atrocitus and brought it to the Guardians. Because apparently, billions of years ago, the Guardians created the very first lantern as a storage battery of all of their own emotions, which is what the Great Heart actually is. Remember that the Guardians rejected emotion eons ago, and so to rid themselves of those emotions, they apparently placed them into this battery. In doing so, they accidentally also created the very first ring. And Volthoom, before he had the capitalization I'm assuming, a traveler from another universe in future time, had traveled back to view this momentous event. But when the ring gets created, he apparently gets greedy and tries to grab it. And it then changes him, sending him back, I guess, to come through Krona's view screen. And then at that point he was all twisted and crazy and became changed into this science class organ man. Now let's learn about the circulatory system of emotion. So anyway, Volthoom gives the Guardians back their emotions now so they can finally feel regret for all the evil that they've caused, and reveals that the reason Ganthet alone had kept some emotion was due to him keeping the ring of the First Lantern inside his stomach, I guess? Or his mouth, maybe? I don't know. I don't think I want to know, but like, gross? That doesn't really explain Saeed and why she had emotion though, but she was ripped apart by the Third Army, so who cares? All the various Lantern Corps show up here to fight the First Lantern at this point, but nothing they do seems to really bother him. And even turning Mogo into a giant Lantern Corps Death Star, which is a phrase I never thought I would say, doesn't seem to do much more than momentarily stun him. Sinestro also shows up independently to pull Parallax out from where it's trapped inside the main green power battery so he can become the new host of Parallax, with the hope that it would make him powerful enough to finally defeat the First Lantern. But even that doesn't seem to be quite enough. Instead, what really seems to finally have an effect is Hal Jordan suddenly showing up as a Black Lantern. So, earlier when Sinestro escaped the dead zone with Simon, he actually seems to have switched places with Black Hand, who had been knocked out by Badge and the Templar Guardians. Hal tried to steal Hand's black ring, but couldn't because he was just still too alive to wear a black ring. So to take care of that, he simply jumps off a giant cliff in the dead zone to kill himself more completely. And while fully dead, he somehow wills the black ring to come to him, and it does. Because again, that's a thing you can do in the dead zone, as we learned when Sinestro got shot by Simon earlier. See? I told you that would be important information, but you didn't believe me. Or probably you did, whichever. So Hal then uses the Indigo power to channel every spectrum to contact Indigo 1, so that she can teleport him out of the dead zone and into the fight on Oa, bringing with him a massive army of Black Lanterns. And Necron, who, as we saw in Blackest Night, is basically death itself. Hal then uses the Black Ring's ability to feed on emotions to simply drain all emotion out of Volthoom, returning him to the simple human that he was before, and then has Necron slash him in half to finally bring an end to the First Lantern Menace. It's funny, though, that Hal is literally the only one here who wasn't menaced in some way by the First Lantern, but he's also the one who gets to defeat him. Always gotta be the chosen one, don't you, Hal? What an attention hog, jeez. With Volthoom dead, leaving me with no excuse to continue saying his silly name, a green ring randomly just comes to Hal Jordan and somehow overwrites his black ring, bringing him magically back to life, which is pretty convenient. Is it because Hal just kind of wills it again? I don't know. And in one sentence, he also sends Necron back to the grave, I guess. Look, it's all coming together real fast at this point. We're running out of time. The entire Sinestro Corps, which Hal and Sinestro had locked up on Oa in an earlier story arc, suddenly attack, and Hal realizes it's a distraction so that Sinestro can go kill the Guardians. Hal races to try and stop him, but it turns out it's already done. Sinestro has already killed all of the Guardians, even Ganthid, who was ready to die since his love Saeed was already dead. The only Guardian he didn't kill is one he left for Atrocitus to kill. Aw, Sinestro, that's so thoughtful. With that job done, Sinestro decides he's just going to leave the known universe. Maybe he'll head to Far Sector, and then we'll never see him again. I mean, but first he'll make a pit stop on Earth to appear in Forever Evil, and then stick around anyway to star in his own series and be part of future crossovers, but, you know, same thing. Also, it's revealed to the reader that he actually didn't kill Ganthid, and that Saeed is also somehow still alive even though we literally watched her get ripped apart. I have no explanation on that, but for whatever reason, I guess because he felt he could relate to Ganthid saying he has nothing left when he too had lost everything, Sinestro has decided that Ganthid and Saeed should get the chance to continue to live in secret away from everyone else. This is essentially where the comic ends, though this final showdown was bookended by a story from the future where the Green Lantern Corps had been revived under the kind leadership of the Templar Guardians, and a mysterious figure who is the keeper of the Book of Oa tells the story of Hal Jordan to a new Lantern recruit. But the recruit wants to know what all became of everybody in the end, so we get an 80s style Where'd They Go montage. Atrocitus and Larfleeze apparently just continue to be mostly the same, though Larfleeze apparently does get his family back at some point. John Stewart and Fatality get married, and John eventually became a US senator following in his mother's footsteps. Guy becomes an old space biker, I guess, wandering around from spaceport to spaceport telling stories of the good old days and giving us another reference to the One Punch meme, because we definitely needed another one of those. Kyle went on to basically become a saint, using his White Lantern power to heal people across the entire universe until the white light apparently just kind of ran out. Similarly, Saint Walker eventually gets married and does his own charity work, and Indigo 1 eventually just gives up her ring altogether because she no longer needs it. Sinestro supposedly actually does disappear, though we see that he is the mysterious keeper of the Book of Oa, and he burned the pages out of the book explaining whatever redemption arc he gets to get him to that point. Lastly, Hal Jordan and Carol Ferris apparently eventually get married and have children and grandchildren and grow old together happily ever after. The end. Only if you watched my other videos, then you already know that the incoming creative teams will do absolutely everything they can to ensure that none of these futures come to pass. Which is kind of a serious bummer, really. I like Geoff Johns giving the characters happy or happy-ish endings, even if realistically I knew none of them would be possible in the world of comic books. Should have seen that disappointment coming, honestly. There is also an additional issue of each series that gives each creative team one final chance to say goodbye. New Guardians mostly just gives us a recap of where each member of the New Guardians currently is, most importantly revealing to us that Kyle somehow revived my good pal Glomulus and sent him to torture Larfleeze. That a boy, Glommy. Green Lantern Corps sees Guy Gardner supercharge himself with St. Walker's blue ring so that he can fly across the universe and smash into Zar, blasting him into just a radiation shadow, as the monster had been attacking Guy's family, and this seems to finally get him a little closure with his family and he reconnects with them, and even his a-hole of a father seems to give in a little bit. Red Lanterns just shows us Atrocitus finishing that hunt for that final Guardian, and more of him talking about how he's rededicating himself to the cause of rage for the entire universe, which will literally not matter one iota in the very next issue of the series, but I've already covered that, so instead, let's get to the breakdown. It's really striking to me that these two crossovers feel like it's all a bunch of Geoff Johns burning down the house that he literally just rebuilt. With the destruction of the Guardians and the flash forward ending, it feels like Johns is basically saying, well, there's nowhere to go from here. And it will kind of feel like that in the continuing series. But regardless, this is an epic ending to Johns' nearly 10-year run, and fittingly feels like a truly big screen blockbuster or series finale. It's amazing how much these creative teams were able to cram in powerful and moving character moments, sprawling mystery, an intriguing villain, and giant space battles all into one story arc. This is the kind of event you want to see from these giant crossovers, and honestly no other New 52 big crossover event manages quite this level of power and fun. But I still do have my complaints. Killing all of Kurragar just to punish Sinestro just feels wrong. In the flash forward ending, while I do kind of like it, in this format mostly only serves to hurt future creative teams who are forced to try to either live up to it or completely ignore it. And either way, that sets them up for failure. The story also concludes way too quickly, with tons of stuff happening during the final battle with little explanation and little reason for happening beyond, just because. And Volthoom himself, while he is an interesting villain as I said, is also severely lacking as a villain in a lot of ways too. This is essentially the story that exists to explain who he is, but we barely get any explanation at all. And he dies here, so, it would be weird to get more answers about him in the future. But we do, though not until well into the DC Rebirth, so that's also weird, but again, I'm not covering that series, at least not yet. So what I will say is that I give this series a recommendation level of very high. If you've been reading any of the renewed Green Lantern since Hal's Rebirth, then you should absolutely check out this epic ending to Geoff Johns' run. The collected edition gets 1 Yellow Lantern Ring. Which, again, I'm going with being just kind of a bad thing, it's just slightly left of the middle of the rainbow spectrum. It is 16 issues, which is a lot, especially considering how long Green Lantern issue 20 is, but it's also a lot of money and there are no bonus features whatsoever. So I'd still say go for volume 3 of each of the individual series collections so you can get both crossovers at once. Plus probably a few additional issues and maybe even some other goodies. Volthoom! Thanks everybody for watching, and wow did this one get away from me. These single volume videos were supposed to be short. Oh boy. Anyway, still 2 more crossovers to go, so if you did enjoy this video and can't wait to see those videos, or just want to see what else I cover in the New 52, or maybe Rebirth Green Lantern, or anything else I might cover, then do make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons so you can be sure to be around next time, and I hope to see you then, right here, in the Comic Cave.